Welcome back. President Trump began the week giving an update on what his plans are for the war in Afghanistan. There were also reports that the Secret Service is struggling to pay the president's large security bill. Trump also started his campaign for re-election in 2020 when he spoke earlier this week in Phoenix, Arizona. Protesters were lining the streets, and the president did go off script, talking more about Charlottesville. And then he traveled to Reno, Nevada to speak to veterans about their benefits. The president will be at Camp David over the weekend, but the White House says he's well aware of the hurricane that is hitting Texas later tonight. And here to help us talk all about the week in Washington is Keith Fitzgerald, a political professor at New College of Florida, Mark Weston, a presidential election historian and author of The Land and People of Pakistan, and David Samuel, the president of the Republican Club of Northport. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
And I want to just go through and get everyone's opinion. This was just the week that ran the gamut, basically, and kind of give me just an assessment on your initial thoughts of how you think the president may have scored this week. We'll start with Keith.
Well, I think these last 2 weeks will go down in history as two of the worst weeks in the history of the United States presidency. It's gone beyond short-term politics, left, right, Democrat, Republican. It's now to the point where I believe he's diminished the power of the office and the credibility in a way that has some lasting ramifications. When a sitting president is attacking the leaders of his own party, when a former intelligence director is saying that he believes he's unstable, when a Republican United States senator is saying a Republican president is not competent to do the job, this is remarkable. So it would be an understatement to say it was a bad week. It was a terrible week for the president, but I think worse, it was a terrible week for the presidency and a terrible week for the United States.
Okay, and Mark, your thoughts.
This week has shown the fallacy of the idea that a businessman can run the government better than a politician. It is a different skill set. CEOs give orders. Businessmen have to deal with elected representatives from 50 different states. And instead, Trump has been making enemies of the very senators that he's going to need to pass legislation in the future. He feels that with his base, he can intimidate members of Congress, but his base is only 35%. It is declined by 1% a month. By next spring, it'll probably be in the 20s, and he will find that he can't intimidate anybody in Congress because his base is too small to win in a general election.
Okay, and I have a feling that you may have some different thoughts.
Yes, I'm in a different world, I guess, but Trump's supporters are still solidly behind him. And one of the things I try to remind my friends, the far left is trying to distract, disrupt, and demonize Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Keep that in mind and listen to the facts. Get your news sources from all sorts of sources. Congressional Record, Fox News, ABC. Vary your news sources and make up your own mind. Don't let the things that are going on distract you, because Donald Trump is trying to achieve his agenda. Lowering taxes, that's a big one coming up, the income tax, and revisiting health care. And if you look right now, things are going well with the stock market. So things are going well for Donald Trump.
But do you think that if those are his priorities, maybe some of the things that have transpired over the last week maybe are distracting from that agenda?
Yes, they are distracting from that agenda, but he's going to get back onto his agenda. Right now, his main concern is the hurricane that's hitting Texas, and I think he'll be on top of that.
Okay, we'll talk more about that. We're just getting warmed up when we come back. We do have some breaking news, though, regarding Hurricane Harvey. That's coming up next. Welcome back. President Trump had a rough last couple of weeks by some accounts. His comments on Charlottesville last week had members of his own party speaking out against those comments. This week, he spoke out about the war in Afghanistan, veterans' benefits, and more. Joining us now is Keith Fitzgerald, a political professor at New College of Florida, Mark Weston, a presidential election historian and author, and Dave Samuel, the president of the Republican Club of Northport. So first, I want to start with Keith and ask you to compare just how different those speeches were, the one he gave that was more of a campaign-style rally in Phoenix versus when he addressed veterans about benefits in Reno, a totally different tone.
Right. So in Reno, he called for unity, healing, and love, which is in response to the problem he caused with the disunity and division in the previous speech. So these speeches careen wildly from one view to another. It suggests both inconsistency hypocrisy, and somewhat instability, if at best deep cynicism about the United States. And I think the thing about the Phoenix speech that is so remarkable is just how divisive it is. We're reopening wounds that were healed in the Civil War by talking about our heritage. And this is just not what we need. But to say that then and turn around and say we need unity and love is just remarkably cynical. And I think it's dispiriting and discouraging. And I just do want to say that this is beyond Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, Tom and Jerry, sheepdog and wolf. This really has to do with the country. And this is not good for us. When he's attacking his own people, John McCain, I'll tell you, I followed Mitch McConnell for 45 years because I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. If there's anything that he believes in, it's civil rights. And he is now appalled at his own president from his own party. So this is not about Republican and Democrat, liberal and conservative. This is about the United States of America. And I think these two different speeches dramatize how he's driving us apart and making us feel uneasy and anxious.
And what are your thoughts on that, about the divide between Mitch McConnell and President Trump, and then even his comments on Senator Jeff Flake? What is with this division within the party?
Well, again, these are folks that have been in office for a long, long time. Donald Trump is new. President Trump is new. And he's often mentioned draining the swamp. And a lot of these folks are leftovers from the old days. They don't understand what the people really want. And the people want some action right now. So he's putting some pressure on them to do what they were elected to do by the people.
And then how do you, it's quite a, I'm missing the word right now, but there's really a comparison when you look at how many people he brings out to these rallies and how excited they are about his thoughts, comments, plans. But then you see things like this Quinnipiac poll that came out on Wednesday that shows 62% of voters say that President Trump is doing more to divide the country than to unite it. So I want to get your response to that.
My belief in the polls right now, when he was running for office, they were all wrong. But if you look at some of the other people they put in front of these polls, McConnell and some of the other folks that we mentioned, they rate even lower than President Trump. And he's doing what the people want, and he's not worried about the polls, and neither are most of the supporters of Donald Trump.
And Mark, let's talk a little bit about this spending bill issue with this divide between Mitch McConnell and President Trump, who says if we have to shut down the government to build this wall, we're going to do it. Then Paul Ryan comes out and says, I don't think we need to shut down the government. We don't want to shut down the government. So what happens? Do they get something passed by the end of the fiscal year at the end of September?
I hope so, because who wants to see the government shut down? First of all, I thought Mexico was going to pay for the wall. That's what he said all through last year. I don't think the Republicans, they have the Senate, the House, and the presidency. If the government shuts down, there's no way they can blame this on the Democrats. It's their baby if the government shuts down. And I think they'll get together and find a way not to have it shut down. It's not something that anybody wants, Republican or Democrat. In terms of, he talks about healing. The way to heal is to criticize yourself a little bit and praise other people a little bit. And he has never done this, ever. I don't think he's capable of dealing it. And he makes each speech to the audience that's in the room, and he's never interested in whatever he said yesterday. He's focused on the room he's talking to today. So we're going to live with this inconsistency for another couple of years.
And Dave, what do you think about the rehashing of Charlottesville? Do you understand his strategy with that? I mean, he's now brought it up at several different, and each one struck like a slightly different tone. What do you think about that? Should he have kind of just let sleeping dogs lie, or why do you think he keeps bringing that back up?
Well, if placing myself in his shoes, I look back to the 1990s and several other times when he came out strongly against the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazism. And the press keeps asking him questions over and over again. What do you think about the Klan? What do you think about the neo-Nazis? And he's already responded to them time and time and time again. And when he came out the first time after Charlottesville, he may have not mentioned the people, but folks knew what he meant when he stated about the bad people and the good people. And then later on, he did come out and say the Klan and the neo-Nazis. And He's a novice at this, but he's also a person who is against those organizations, always has been, and I believe that the Democrats, and especially the far left, are just making a big issue out of this, again, to distract people.
And I think the three words we keep hearing over and over was on, or were on both sides, when he said there were fine people on both sides. I think that's what really sunk him in this criticism. What are your thoughts when he said that?
If you looked at what was going on, you saw both sides fighting. There were also people standing by. Some of them were dupes. They're there just to be there, and they're associated with these groups. And maybe he was talking about bystanders that came and really weren't part of this, that were actually just expressing their free speech rights to come to that event.
Okay, and Keith, your thoughts on this rehashing of Charlottesville?
On Monday was not 1990. He was saying divisive things on Monday. And then in Phoenix, he talked about our culture and our heritage. These are long-term buzzwords for white supremacy. So you can say in the 1990s he condemned the Ku Klux Klan. He is on an ongoing basis trying to divide white versus black, Catholic and Jew against Protestant. It's just remarkable how outside of the mainstream he is. And the idea that somehow the Civil Rights Act and the idea that all people are created equal or the far left is going to get you guys in big trouble if you don't watch out. These are settled issues. There is one status of citizen in the United States, not several. It's not our heritage to stand up for white supremacy. My heritage, my great-grandfather fought in the Civil War. He was an immigrant from Ireland escaping colonialism. He came here and fought for the freedom of the slaves. That's my heritage. I don't relate to our heritage being taken away.
And I know that that keeps coming up when he says our culture, and that's been used, that word has been used by white supremacists, but that word has been used by many, many people who are not white supremacists.
Not really. Not in the context of talking about Civil War memorials. And when you're talking about Civil War memorials, that is a long-term buzzword, code word for white supremacy, and it's just a matter of history. Those statues were put up in the 1920s when the Ku Klux Klan came back again after they had been nearly eradicated, partly because they were upset about Catholics and Jews coming to the United States. So, you know, this is very, very deeply divisive language, and we just don't need it. It's just not what we need. You talked about action. That's not action. That's driving us apart. It's making it harder for us to solve our common problems.
I know, Dave, I know you want to respond. I have to go to break, but I will give you the floor when we come back. Welcome back. Our guests are joining us with their final thoughts. We have so much to get to, not enough time for all of it, but Dave, I'm going to let you respond to what Keith had said.
Yeah, Keith was talking about racism and code words. I'd like to remind people that Donald Trump, his daughter and his son-in-law are Jewish. And also he has a black gentleman, Dr. Ben Carson, in the HUD department as the director of that. And then also, if you look at some of the other things that he's done, he's pushing for diversity in several of his departments. And this is something I don't think a racist would do.
Okay, and Mark, your final thoughts on some of the discussion that we've had tonight.
We're about to get into a quagmire in Afghanistan. We've been there 16 years. He wants to keep us there. I don't see what's going to happen in the 17th, 18th, or 19th year that hasn't happened. The Taliban are ethnic Pashtuns. They're kind of like the Klingons in Star Trek. They live for fighting and honor. They control the countryside. Once you get out of the cities, we are not going to defeat them. We have one interest and only one interest in Afghanistan. We don't want anyone harboring terrorists there. And I think we can make a deal with the Taliban. You can have the country and put it back in the Middle Ages if that's what you want to do. And don't harbor terrorists or we'll come back and bomb you. That would be it would save hundreds of lives and hundreds of billions of dollars instead of prolonging this quagmire.
And Keith, do you think with this hurricane coming, the president plans to go to Texas, do you think that there is some way he can kind of go on a really good PR trip with this?
Well, I don't think dealing with a hurricane is an opportunity for public relations. I think it's an opportunity to do well by the people of the United States. And so I hope he doesn't use it for a PR trip. I hope he uses it to make sure everything's going well and get things done. And that's really where we need to get back to in this country, where people work together, have legitimate disputes, legitimate debates, but understand we have a common purpose and focus on what solutions will move us forward. That's where we need to be.
Okay, so one last thought. We have 30 seconds.
I'd like to say something. This is probably the best prepared government for a hurricane ever, because FEMA has really moved on up for training for local, state, and federal level. So you're going to see some great things happen.
But he hasn't appointed a head of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration yet.
Okay, well, we just hope that no matter what, politics aside, that everyone is safe and that the response is fantastic. So SRQ Airport is expanding, but is it enough to keep local residents from flying out of Tampa or Orlando, maybe even Fort Myers? SRQ has 3 of the top 4 major carriers, American, Delta, and United, missing Southwest. The ticket prices have stayed consistent because of the flights are staying full, so they don't have a reason to take down the ticket price. We asked you on Facebook if the expansion of the airport is enough, or are you driving to another airport because of the cost? Here are some of your comments. Tracy starts off our comments tonight by saying, my husband and I live in Nebraska and visit Sarasota several times each year. We always fly into SRQ. The cost difference is very small compared to the convenience. The airport is always clean and the staff is always helpful. We love SRQ. John, though, feels differently and says rates are too high. Not enough airlines to choose from. Not enough direct flights to places. Sorry, usually fly out of Tampa. SRQ needs to do a lot of growing and expanding. And Mike with our final comment of the night saying, since Southwest bought out AirTran, I've been using the Tampa airport. Airfare is simply too expensive to fly out of SRQ for a lot of people. They need to have competitive rates if they want to be successful. If you would like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, you can visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And you can always watch our discussions on demand. They are available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. A big thank you to our guest, Keith Fitzgerald, a political professor at New College of Florida, Mark Weston, a presidential election historian and author, and Dave Samuel, the president of the Republican Club of Northport.